We've had two meetings of a coordinating group. As you know, that we had one about 3 weeks ago, and we had a similar one on Monday, where we had a number of the ambassadors and heads of missions that participated in that meeting. From that, a smaller group was formed, more of a subcommittee, to essentially focus in on some of the key issues. In particular, given that there are a number of countries now that are willing to work in collaboration with the government to build capacities in the elections office, it is important to ensure that there's a coordinated effort in terms of the assistance that's going to flow, because you can have 5 countries all wanting to do voter education, and in other areas there may not be no assistance. So obviously that needs to be sorted out. There is no doubt that there needs to be some capacity building in the elections office. It is quite unfortunate if you look at the elections office in particular over the past decade, if not more, where there has been no long-term capacity building within that office. People generally there's a huge fervor through the media and through the civil service, etc., come election time, but then after that everybody disappears from the elections office. So there's no particular career path for people within the elections office. And if you look at other jurisdictions, there are people who stay there and they build capacities, and people actually become specialists in different areas. You're specialists in, for example, demographics, and people who are specialists in polling stations and specialists in media awareness and voter education. We don't have any of that capacity within the elections office that has been built over the past number of years. So the Beni Marama government's view is that we need to take a long-term view, given also the fact now that elections will be held sooner rather than later. As you know, that under the draft constitution, elections are to be held every 4 years at the latest, or at the earliest 3.5 years. So from the meeting that we've had, we had a smaller subcommittee meeting that was held yesterday, which consisted of representatives from Australia, New Zealand, Papua New Guinea, and the EU. The Commonwealth could not be there, of course. It was a short notice. But essentially, we have decided to carry out a gap analysis, or what you call a needs assessment. As you know, that we had asked for the UN to carry out a needs assessment nearly 18 months ago, but nothing really came out of it in terms of from them. So we are carrying out a gap analysis or needs assessment, which will mean that from next week, Monday, we will have a representative from the EU, a representative from the elections office in New Zealand, and also a representative from the Commonwealth. Commonwealth just wrote to us yesterday, and we've already communicated with them, and we hope to have their rep here also by Monday. It is envisaged that they will carry out and produce a report within a period of 2 weeks. The gap analysis or the needs assessment will be critical, not just in terms of coordinating assistance, but also in terms of finding out the areas where the elections office needs to be built up vis-a-vis capacity. We've had, of course, individual offers of assistance from a number of countries. I see that in the media there's some dollar figures have been floated. None of the letters that we have received have contained any of the dollar numbers, except, of course, the public pledge that was made by Papua New Guinea when the Prime Minister visited Papua New Guinea on a state visit. Papua New Guinea, as you know, is in the subcommittee also. So we will be working with them in terms of seeing as to when the various monies and can be put into the elections office, but it is fair both on the government and also, of course, the donors to ensure that the monies are spent in the right places. Of course, there are a number of new areas that will be developed for the election in 2014. As you know that everybody will have only one vote. We also are targeting to hold the elections in one day. So that obviously will mean in terms of the logistical arrangements that will change. We need to ensure that some of the anomalies that took place in the 2006 elections do not take place. For example, there needs to be a science around the establishment of polling stations. You know, hypothetically, for example, you may have a polling station for, say, every 2,000 people. So wherever there is a population pocket of 2,000 people, you need to put a polling station in order to ensure that we have elections conducted in one day and properly, and everybody has the ability to vote. We have, like I said, had the individual offers of assistance, but all the countries and agencies have decided that let's do the gap analysis, then they will provide the assistance. Some, of course, have come out outright. Some of them, of course, have different financial years. The Koreans, for example, have offered $150,000 for vehicles, and they need to spend that money this year in their financial year. So we are liaising with them in terms of when they can spend it and what type of vehicles will be required, etc. So there are those sort of unique scenarios for different countries, but overall everybody is working together. We had a room full of people on Monday. So that, ladies and gentlemen, in a nutshell, are the issues pertaining to the assistance that has been offered. They range from paying for salaries to providing technical assistance, logistical support, drafting electoral rules. There's a number of various areas. They've also, a couple of the countries have also said they wish to provide support to the new parliamentary office in terms of building capacity within the parliament when it recommences, and obviously some staff need to be trained for that. But that's outside, technically outside the gambit of the elections office. So in respect of the elections office, there are some of the forms of assistance that have been offered. Maybe we'll have some questions.
The U.S. government, through the U.S. Embassy, made some comments. They've quoted a figure of about $1 million saying they're ready to give, and they said they made it clear it was conditional assistance based on certain things like having a supervisor of elections, electoral commission, and things like that, and letting observers come in, local or international. Those things, they said they sent a letter to you. Have you received a letter and been considered? Any comments on that?
Well, I think, what sometimes is written to us and what is said to the media are two different things. We need to take that on board. As I said, the letter did not quote any figures, but they've said that they wish to contribute in various forms. I think I've got here assistance to the Electoral Commission. They want to assist in the tabulation of results, etc. So, we offer an opportunity to them to provide assistance if they wish to. Like we said, we have a number of countries have shown goodwill, and we appreciate that. Well, regarding elections office and electoral commission, they're all givens. So, you of course have to have an independent electoral commission. You of course have to have a supervisor of elections. So, it's not really saying much. They are all characteristics of a electoral system that needs to be in place in order to have elections in a free, fair, and transparent manner.
In terms of the groundworks, a lot has been done. What more would be done in the future? What needs to be done?
Well, in fact, I think a lot of work needs to be done. In fact, there's a whole range of issues that need to be addressed in terms of just the actual personnel, logistical arrangements. As you know, that we've already had a bulk of Fijians are now registered to vote. But, in terms of working out the logistics regarding polling stations, we of course have to identify materials that need to be, purchased, ballot boxes that nobody can tamper with, that meet international or UN standards. There's obviously a lot of electoral rules that need to be drafted to remove the subjectivity and the discretionary powers of returning officers. And that has been one of the major problems that previously I also highlighted in the EU report, that you had discretionary powers that were given to returning officers that really should not be given to them. The idea of, for example, having decentralized counting stations needs to also have rules around it. Who can be present? Who should be present? So, I mean, there are a number of sort of fine details that need to be worked out. So the needs assessment or the gap analysis will, in fact, hone in those issues. It will also help identify various timelines. You know, we need to achieve certain outcomes by specific periods of time, including, for example, the need to identify certain, obviously, issues can be addressed now, but it's something that you may use later. So, for example, if you have a donor that's got the financial period is ending now, they want to contribute in buying ballot boxes. So we need to do essentially an analysis as to how many ballot boxes we will actually require. That will require an assessment of how many polling stations we'll have. So all of those things, logistics need to be worked out. Where will you store them? You know, it's right down to the nitty-gritty. So we don't want things left to chance. We don't want to be recruiting people on the 11th hour. And of course, the Electoral Commission will, once the Constitution is in place, the Electoral Commission will be appointed, and they will also have a supervisory role in respect of the Elections Office. They will also have an input in terms of the selection of the supervisor of elections. That needs to be, whoever it is, needs to be appointed. So there is some thought around perhaps advertising for that position, you know, to give people more time to think about it, and so we can also advertise internationally for a supervisor of elections.
Is the Constitution coming out? Because a lot will depend on that and moving on from there.
Very soon.
Very soon?
Very soon.
Sometime this month?
Very soon.
And on electronic voting, I mean, we've got electronic registration. We know that this one definitely will not be electronic voting, or that's still on the table at this stage, based on the systems?
Well, I think at the moment our focus is more on building the capacity. Whether we have electronic voting or not will all depend on the needs and the capacity within the elections office, but also if you have electronic voting, you need electricity. Some places may not necessarily have access to electricity. And in fact, we were talking to a representative from the UN who recently was talking about an experience in one of the African countries where they had a wonderful electronic voter system, but nobody actually sort of realized that perhaps in some parts they do not have electricity, so they had not catered for generators. So, I mean, all of that comes with the needs and the gap analysis. But you know, at the end of the day, the idea is that we have every Fijian given the opportunity to vote. You know, the example we continue to use is that Indonesia has about 120 million voters, spread over 10,000 islands. They have elections in one day. And one of the issues we've also highlighted to the coordinating committee is that we want participatory democracy. That is, we like decentralized polling stations in the sense where counting can take place also. So, you know, people living in that area can actually see the process, as opposed to ballot boxes being taken away to Natambua High School or Suva Grammar School. So nobody gets to see what happens. What is it like to open ballot boxes? What is it like to see the counting being done? And in fact, the Indonesian model is quite good in that sense, where, you know, the people from living in that area or in the village, they actually see people opening up ballot boxes and the votes being counted and their views actually translating into victory or wins for specific candidates. So, you know, there are some of the basic principles that we have that we want to encourage. And of course, you know, it is very, very critical that in the needs and gap analysis, we also ensure that the selection of people who work in the elections office is also carried out in a transparent manner on a merit-based system. Again, going back to the EU report, they highlighted that that was not done. We've had previously where, some civil servants have taken paid leave and gone off and worked in the elections office and come back in. We do not want people who work in the elections office to politicize the elections office. And that's very, very critical. There are a number of young people in Fiji who are educated and who are willing to participate, and perhaps they are the ones who should be, in fact, recruited for this process. As you know, in the EVR process, when the advertisements went out, there was a proper, transparent manner in which people were selected on merit. Everybody had to, for example, go through police clearance, etc. 70% of the EVR clerks who were appointed were females. So, I mean, whenever you have a merit-based system, you always get a good result.
As government, do you have an estimate as monetary value that we need to work with these elections next year? How much you may need for the elections itself?
Well, in terms of direct funding requirement by government, obviously a lot of it will depend on how the donors come on board or the assistance is provided. That's why it's critical for us to do this needs assessment. And then once we've identified that, and if different countries or agencies take on board ownership of certain areas, then we also will need to see where there are gaps, and we need to fund those areas ourselves also. So that's a work in progress.
So what the registration for those living overseas?
Yes, I mean, we obviously had some discussions actually with the UNDP reps too, and they've shared some of the experience of other countries where they do also have a diaspora of people, in different countries. How best to do it? I mean, there are some countries that have a very what we call trusting system. New Zealand, for example, you simply just fill out the form and you send it across and they register you. It's very simple. Given our track record of some of our politicians and some of the other players, that may not be as easy as what we envisage. But we're still working that out because we need to ensure that there's integrity within the data. With the data previously has also been polluted, if you like, with identity thefts. So we have to ensure that that is not polluted, for want of a better word.
I just wanted you to clarify for our listeners, because some people have been calling up or raising issue in relation to registration of people abroad. What's the criteria for them to be registered to vote in the elections next year?
They have to be a Fijian citizen. If you are a person living overseas, one of the key documents that you require to be able to register would be your current Fijian passport. That is critical. So you have to be a Fijian citizen when you go to register.
You hold dual citizenship?
That is still allowed, yes. So you have to have a current Fijian passport. You simply, there are some people obviously who revoked or gave up their Fijian citizenship. They obviously can't vote, or can't register, I should say, to vote. Yeah. So you have to produce your Fijian passport. In terms of when we will specifically do that and how we'll do that, we're obviously talking to some experts too regarding that, and at the same time we are mindful about the need to maintain the integrity of the data.
It's a mammoth task to start off things after the Constitution, get the electoral laws in place, on-the-ground awareness, get the team all set. Logistically, can still make it by September 2014?
Almost definitely. I think, the needs assessment will essentially hone into the specific areas, and this is why we are working now with the various partners, collaborators, if you like, to ensure that it all happens. There are different expertise, in different areas. For example, voter awareness and media campaigns obviously can be done by experts, and you have people who are professionals in that area, and that can almost immediately start soon after the Constitution is in place regarding the Electoral Commission, regarding the new electoral system. In terms of the purchase of the materials, obviously that can be very easily identified also. In fact, we've had people who've written to us wanting to provide ballot papers from offshore, by way of assistance. We've had people who want to provide us with indelible ink, just by way of registering those people who've actually voted, so you know that they've voted. But I think with the right people in place, it can be done, in fact, much earlier. But the deadline is, in the draft constitution, is to have the elections by 30th September 2014.
CCF has made a statement about not just verbally saying that there will be an independent supervisor or independent electoral commission. You must have seen the statement they released today.
Oh, no, I haven't actually.
They've said that, and they said that you have to show proof by appointing a constitutional officers commission, then that appoints the electoral commission, and that appoints the supervisor of elections. Your comments on that?
Well, look, we are actually focused on what we are supposed to be doing. We already have a process in place. Perhaps some people feel a bit left out, and that's why they're making comments on the side. That's all I have to say to that.
Can I ask one more question about e-ticketing? About other players coming in and when that will be, because you've made the announcement that things will be worked out. Just trying to find out the details about that, when that will come into play.
Well, at the moment, as you know, that people can pay for their bus fares using cash. And there are some bus companies that already had started e-ticketing. And people who have the cards can use that also. So there's no issues regarding that. And it should also be emphatically stated that any bus company that has a broken down machine and a person walks in with their card, if they cannot use their card, they have to allow the passenger on board. And I think that has already been clarified also a couple of days ago. In respect of the standards, they needed to be regulated. And as we had envisaged, there are a number of issues that needs to be understood by all the players. When we got involved in it, we discovered that there are some issues that had not been addressed properly. So they are still being worked out. And I think at the end of the day, once they have been resolved, the standards that you'll put in place will be acceptable by all, and in fact it will be most beneficial for the public. There are also issues, for example, the back-end services. People may not necessarily realize this, but you need not just the front end that speaks to each other, compatibility, but back end needs to be compatible too. It's for example, if I have a card A, and I go and use a machine that's card B machine, when the bus company is paid at the end of the day or the next day, there needs to be reconciliation for them to be able to transfer the funds so the bus company gets the right amount of money. And so obviously that requires a bit more input. And that's what's been worked out. But in the meantime, the public can travel by paying cash.